What's up, guys? It's D22, so Wayne Chiang of the Live of the Bike Poker stream. Oh my god, this is the legend, Zack. If you guys never heard him speak or talk to him, you'll see this phenomenon where you speak to him or you listen to him, and your IQ goes up by like 6.3 points. So you're in for a treat.
Wow. It's a strong intro. Thank you, Ed.
Well,
All right, man.
nowadays I'm hitting the 100 IQ after talking to you several times.
Just call me up for a little boost.
Yeah, no, it's I'm doing okay, and thanks for all the stupid questions I have for you for poker. You've done a lot more studying in those games, and you won a bracelet last year. You were in the running for play of the year, and we had talked about it, and it wasn't worth your time, especially without like some sort of compensation for player of the year. Which I think David Baker brought out if there's monetary compensation for play of the year, it's more incentive for people to chase after it. Buddy of ours, Jesse Martin, said you used to be the best kept secret in poker, but now you're not a secret anymore.
Yeah, he said that in whatever 2016 when I only existed in the living in commerce 24/7. It's been a while.
And I say on Live at the Bike broadcast all the time, usually if I see a play I'm just like, and I don't necessarily agree with, I'm just like, yeah, I don't recommend that. And then when I see you do it, I'm like, Dan's right. I'll just take a back seat and watch you do it. That's how much cred you have. So just want to get your background on poker. I don't know how much the audience knows your backstory.
Sure. I can give a brief rundown. I started playing in 2003, right after Moneymaker won the main, and it was on ESPN. The only notable thing about that is I was 10 at the time. So starting to play meant more. Initially, I would force my friends or family to play at pretty much every possible opportunity that I could. And when people started saying no because they were tired of being told to play poker by a 10-year-old kid, I started making online accounts to play all the play money tournaments back then. So that was the era of Paradise Poker. I don't know if everyone will know that because that died pretty soon after that. But my first account was on Paradise, and then I remember in middle school, like after basketball practice, I would always come home and play every single party poker play chip tournament as well. And then Full Tilts and Poker Stars. I slowly, as I got older, started playing free rolls. Full Tilts and Stars used to run, on the hour, $100 to $300 free rolls with like 2,700 people in the field. And occasionally you would win $10 and try to spin it, and would eventually bust it and just keep firing. But that's how I first got into it.
And I don't know, okay, not gonna throw ourselves under the bus, but you vaguely remembered one of my screen names, I think, on Full Tilt. I don't want to mention any of our stuff. So then how did you ascend to 1 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoin stakes? or whatever stakes you're playing?
So I did this for a long time. I wasn't like a winning player at all throughout my like early teenage years. I was just sort of a degenerate losing player who couldn't get enough of it.
First lie. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Even though I really wanted to be good. I remember I had my dad buy me Dan Harrington's books on poker, and I read these when I was 12 or 13. I read Super System when I was around that age. I tried playing mixed games online. I may have actually had pretty early on a positive win rate just in terms of big blinds, but I was so wanting to just instantly be the guys that I was watching on TV on like high stakes poker that I was never playing games where I had more than 2 to 3 buy-ins for. I just had zero, bankroll discipline. I don't know, around like age 15 or 16, I might have run up something like a 20K roll once from one of these free rolls. Pretty, like, just a
Whoa.
very going up stakes. And then I ended up, playing something like 200, 400 heads up limit hold'em against whoever was in the lobbies and busting it very quickly. But, every one of those buy-ins was basically like that was spun from buying in for my entire bankroll for the minimum buy of whatever table I was buying into. So I remember I used to have like $100 and I would immediately jump into, $1, $2 no limit. And then I would have $500 and I would jump into, 510. And then I would have like $1,000 and I would jump into 75, 150 limit stud high or limit Raz and just like try to make it happen. So most of the time it wouldn't work out and occasionally it would. But eventually it always comes crashing down. And it wasn't real money to me at the time, which is a part of why this was like it was under someone else's name. I didn't have a way to withdraw it. The money didn't really like tangibly mean anything. And it was sort of like I was addicted to other video games or addicted, whatever at the same time. And this was just another video game with like a score that you just try to run up and see what your high score can be before it goes back to zero. Was kind of how I looked at it.
So this is like the most realistic scene in Rounders, where Mike McDermott just says bankroll on table, like right at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely always bankroll on table. Although for McDermott, like it means something to me. It was always just like from these free rolls. It never really was. It was always just like whatever. Like this is fun, and when I busted it, I would be sad for like a day, and then just it because it never really felt tangibly like it meant anything.
But your life didn't depend on it, right? Like you weren't paying, like you were still a kid, so
No, I like never cashed out during this time. Towards the end of high school, I started to think about what I wanted to do, and I thought this seems like a cool thing to do. Maybe this will be my career because I hate school. I don't want to go to college. And around that time was like the first time I started taking sort of bankroll seriously, and then instantly got hit with Black Friday. And so it was like, oh, I guess I won't play poker. I'll go to college and get a real job. And that was the last time I played poker for like 3 or 4 years following that.
Wow.
So I guess not 3, probably like 2.5 or 3 years.
Still.
So that happened my senior year of high school was Black Friday. And I attended college until I studied abroad in Germany. Second semester of sophomore year, I ended up at a casino in Wiesbaden in Germany, and kind of liked it. Played a couple times. It was cool. They had like a dress code. You get up in a suit or whatever, and you play some 1-2 euro with uncapped rake, no limit hold'em, where the game's completely unbeatable. Everyone's clothes are worth 50 times more than the amount of chips that they have in front of him. Whatever, but it was kind of like, oh yeah, I sort of like poker. And so when I got back to the States, I was 20 at the time, and I went to Turning Stone, which is an 18 plus casino in upstate New York, where a lot of other poker players have, you'll hear reference from before they turn 21. And I ended up bringing 2 friends from high school that had also like sort of done the same kind of messing around as me, and I'd had like $1,000, I think maybe like $1,500 that I went up with, and sort of was like, all right, I'll just like see if I can spin this, and if it not, like whatever, I'm just going back to school. It was like the summer following sophomore year of college, and I ended up spinning that 2K into like to get 6-figure roll over the course of that summer. So we went for 2 weeks, and I ended up staying for 2 months. And I just it was like impossible run good. I played 2-5 every day, and I was buying in for 500 and cashing out over 5K almost on a daily basis for 2 months straight.
What year was this? It was about 2012.
So 2012. Yeah,
12,
should be the summer of 2012. I must have had a 5K stack in the 500 max buy game 20 times that summer. And then there were a couple 510 games that ran when a poker night in America, the first ever poker night in America came while I was there. And there were some big games that I shot took and ran well in those. There was one guy that played me heads up one night and lost an impossible number at 510 in the middle of this as well. And by the end of that, I was like, oh shit, like maybe that thing that I thought I wanted to do, 2 or 3 years ago is still an option. Because I'd never considered live poker a viable way of playing, because you read all the things back then on 2+2, on Pocket Fives or whatever, and everyone talks about how, how could you ever make money at live poker? You get like, 1/20th as many hands. Think about how bad players have to be. It's impossible for anyone to be that bad. Like, you can't possibly make a living playing live poker. And I'd sort of read that as gospel and had written it off as even an option.
But you were, what do you think about it now? I mean, I feel like live is a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, the difference that was being missed was that online, the best player in the world can play every single table on every single site at the same time.
Yeah.
Whereas in your live casino, the best player who happens to be currently available and wanting to play live poker has to drive to the casino and can play one table at once at one stake. So there's a huge difference in terms of I think that's like the biggest contributing factor to what made online so tough. Is it really only takes a small pool of extremely good players to make online
miserable.
I don't like miserable, but it's actually a competitive environment as opposed to a like recreational friendly gambling environment. It becomes more like a sport and less like gambling or what poker pros, the like classic poker pro is looking for, which is easy money or easy mark.
Right. Yeah, that's. When did you branch out from No Limit Hold'em to the other games? Because I think right now you're more known for. Well, I guess you play everything, but you're more in the streets of those like mixed games.
I mean, I started playing them like 12, 13. Like, I read Super System. I was interested in the games. I definitely was playing, stupidly large heads up Raz stud 8 tables, PLO 8 tables, limit 8 tables back in 2006, 2007. I used to love playing F tops on full tilt when I had rolls, because they would have all the mixed games just like the World Series. You get to play the $300 08 tournament, and you get to play the $1,000 like horse, the big super skillful horse tournament or whatever. But I certainly wasn't like taking them. There's a difference between playing and really trying to get good at versus like just reading Super System is not trying to get good at the game. It's trying to not give your money away where everyone is laughing at you under the table. And I don't know. I started playing mixed games in like 13, like right around when I first turned 21 and got to Commerce. There was a point where I was at the 10-20 no limit table, and everyone was extremely serious and grave and made fun of players for making bad plays. Everyone seemed super bitter. I don't know. It was a really toxic environment. And then there was a mixed table at Commerce that everyone was in their 50s, looked like they didn't really know the rules of the games they were playing, and also like were having a good time. And I sort of was like, this both looks like a softer game. It's actually relatively high stakes, which I was surprised by. And this looks like a place where I won't want to quit doing this within a year or two. And so I tried to make an effort to learn those games at that point.
So, yeah, most of televised poker is No Limit Hold'em. It's almost like a cartoon version of what happens, with the high stakes, or even just like No Limit in general. Like, I feel like the environments for No Limit Hold'em are so toxic compared to other ones. I think it's gotten more competitive every passing day. But do you have any comments on the toxicity of that?
I mean, so public games, it's really interesting. So a group of players who are like legitimately like toxic in terms of just how they act at the table started to show up in like, you know, early 2010s. um, I hate this word toxic because it's starting to get used just to describe people who are better than other people at the game, which is not something that I like, and has really made me sad over the last couple of years. Is that private games have been used instead of locking out people who are miserable to be around. It's just used by hosts to lock
It's
out
like,
anyone that they perceive to
wait,
extract money from the business they're running, which is the game. But there was like a development of people who were actively, almost seemingly trying to be as unpleasant to play with as possible. And you know, in online, when people cut corners to try to steal every dollar of EV, it's like very frustrating. When someone does that to you live, it just, and then everyone else starts doing it. It just becomes such a misery pit for everyone around. And this attitude of I'm not here in any way to
socialize.
right. And to be fair to myself, uh, I sort of came in with that attitude when I was 21 from coming from online, and also from getting cheated in some home games when I was 21 in LA. I had this like it's me against everyone else mindset where I stopped sort of believing in the character of anyone else. And I guess that's like a logical place to end up. But if you're observant, like you realize pretty quickly that everyone is, you know, people are not, everyone is not evil. And it's not hard to identify like who's just trying to be there and be pleasant, or be a good, you know, ethical participant in the game. And to continue acting toxically towards people like that is just like you're part of the system and you're part of the problem. And so I like to think that I've completely outgrown that phase, and it disappoints me to see people who um, have been like this for so long in the public games and continue to just be this huge ball of toxic waste. Just cutting every corner, telling everyone else basically, fuck you, I get mine, like you don't get yours. And doing everything they can to squeeze every dollar out of any interaction they have with everyone around them, regardless of any impact.
Yeah, I mean, I remember coming up, like, you know, part of it is like they're different types of personalities. See, part of it's their game. Some people are actually like that, and that, you know, the game kind of drags your soul down into a state where, like, I could remember several times in my life, I'm just like, dude, I'm just like not a very pleasant person. Not even talking about the downswing part, which we'll get to, but like, yeah, just the environment, like a lot of factors like chasing peak, like downswings. Like one of the things that it hasn't affected me much was like jealousy of somebody else, like a good player or lesser player, like performing well and you're not performing well. Like there's just I'm sure there's like a lot of factors, or yeah, or just like in the big games, sometimes it only runs like once or a few times, and then you just like get buried in that thing and just like wow, and then there's like just no feasible way to like chase back the losses in, you know, a smaller stakes game over a short period of time.
Right. Um, I don't know. Jealousy has also never really been a big issue for me. I feel like I get motivated by people doing well to try to do better instead of like upset that they're doing well and I'm doing poorly. Um, but it's definitely something that makes people be toxic. It's like it is a character trait that a lot of people out there have. Um, and as far as like the game dragging you down, like again, I feel like the game did that to me, at least when I first started. But it, to me, it shows like a lack of, um, I don't know, character almost, if you can't overcome that within a period of time where you have people who are acting so shittily to people who are clearly trying to be ethical, participants within the system and within the game to basically like constantly stab those people in the back just to get yours, because you have some sort of warped notion of it's me against the world after a bunch of years in the system, and observing that there are plenty of people just trying to go about business in a forthright way is just really disappointing to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, and like poker gets ripped on for certain things, and there are definitely certain bad things. So I feel like just delving into other industries, it's all rough the higher up you go. So and things have gotten a lot harder since back then. If in you, like you said, one on the mixed game because it's more pleasant, it's probably more potentially more profitable. If people deviate from no limit hold'em, do you have any advice for them?
In terms of like where to find mixed games, or how to learn mixed games.
Yeah, or the other forms, because I mean, you're one of the people that plays like everything, right? And like, what
Yeah.
would you suggest, like, if somebody's playing no limit hold for a living, and uh, I think a lot of people have brought forth that no limit hold'em may not be the best game in the room. There's, in LA, I think you mentioned this as well. Like, limit hold'em is a slightly healthier ecosystem, and there's PLO and there's mixed games, and there's other options besides from cramming your head into no limit hold'em.
Yes. In my opinion, if you're out there and I assume this question would never really be geared towards anyone really playing extremely high stakes at this point. If you're playing mid stakes no limit, if you're playing slow stakes no limit, you're playing 1, 2, 2, 5, even 5, 10 as a career, and you're interested in changing the game that you play but not actually changing careers from poker. Once live poker comes back, um, like usually the best game in your casino, if it exists, not every casino exists, but like at the bike, at Commerce, like if there is a mid stakes mixed game, that's usually almost always a more pleasant environment than the no limit table that you're at, and oftentimes it's just a better, softer game, better win rate type game. But you have to, the trick with that is you actually have to take the time to get good at the games. You can't just show up and not know the rules and beat everyone,
Yeah.
which you crazily kind of could in 2011. But it's not quite that soft anymore, but it's definitely so much less evolved than No Limit still. And you'll find that it will take a lot less effort to get good at that, than it has taken if you're a winning player at 510 live no limit at this point to reach that point.
So what's the high stakes scene like now? Because like mentioned on television, you see basically just no limit hold'em, whereas at least in LA, at least as of 5 years ago, it was pretty evenly split. Like PLO, mixed games, limit hold'em, no limit. There was a 1-2 and occasionally 2 4 7 card stud game that's now defunct, but that was an option too.
I mean, it's all weird because of coronavirus and quarantine. So all these games have moved online, which has sort of spawned the privatization of games, where a lot of professional players have sort of shifted from trying to play professionally to try to cultivate rake professionally. And so they are working towards creating private games where it seems like a lot of the focus has become the guy running the game either A, wants to be the best player in the game along with his friends, or B, wants to create a game where he might not even necessarily play, but he balances the skills of the players as evenly as he can, basically, protecting the fish by not allowing anyone that can win at a significant rate into the game, so that it generates more rake before the losing players lose enough money to quit. You like the best thing you can have as an operator, right, is for everyone to break even
Yeah.
in blinds, and you rake the maximum amount of rake from them before they give up. If you have someone beating someone else for 100 blinds for 100 hands, that person's barely going to make any money before they just quit your system.
Right.
And with coronavirus, the mixed community and the high stakes community of any of these games isn't that large. And so you can more or less recruit globally from the pool and try to put together a club that meets one of those two criterias that you've set forth. And that's sort of become the high stakes scene during coronavirus. And so you sort of have a two-tiered system where you have these private games that are being run in one of those two fashions, or you have the public games that existed prior, which are obviously by 2020 mostly dead as a result of more or less very few losing players are not getting recruited out of public games into private games. So a lot of these guys that run private games will even show up in the public games occasionally with more or less the express intent of poaching players from the game into their games on the side. And so what you end up with is a pool of professionals who haven't been poached and are too good to be allowed into the private games that I mentioned that allow pros in who don't win too much effectively. It's, there's become this like two-tiered system view of pros that's not even always accurate, but that's how game runners are trying to run these private games. And so most of those guys also don't have a lot of heart to battle. And so the lobbies just end up completely withered and dead, more or less. And it's kind of a sad but seemingly inevitable feeling to how improvement in poker is headed, at least in terms of a live environment, in an online environment. Live will always be different just because you still have to fill the table with people who live locally and are willing to gamble at whatever stakes you're offering a game at. But online, you can just be so efficient globally that you can always have a full table with exactly the mix of people that you want.
What were you doing anything live, or you just mainly were doing online even before quarantine?
I was mostly playing online before quarantine. I moved back from LA when I was playing live at the bike like 2 years ago.
Old school live at the bike. You're not old school because you're 2 years old.
Yes. 2 years ago live at the bike. I moved back to New Jersey and was definitely going to play live maybe once, sometimes twice a week. But was trying to spend, the problem out here, unlike LA, is that the games run on weekends. And my girlfriend works during the week and I want to spend time with her during the weekends. And so I was often just trying to play whatever was available online during the week, work during weeks, and then, hang out during the weekend. There was one live game out here that runs on Tuesdays. So I was going to that one and then trying to play Monday through Friday. Just whatever was available, and sometimes would go in to Borgata on the weekends, but it was rare.
Yeah, that's growing up, there's a lot of like real life stuff that you just can't do when you were younger. Like somebody was asking me during quarantine, since I'm doing so much here, they're like, "Oh, do you like this better? Are you not going to go back to the bike?" I'm like, "No, I used to be online with like everything I do. I like it better, but sometimes you have to enter the real world in order to potentially expand options." Or
at some point in your life you have to decide that maximizing hourly or EV is not the end all be all of life. I feel like a lot of poker players trace their roots back when they were 21 to when you learn poker. The strategy is almost rooted around within the game, like the best strategical decision is whatever the highest EV decision, and like a lot of poker players start to expand that thought out to all of their life and their decision making. And if you always take the decision that is the highest EV or hourly in the short term, like you will end up never sleeping or eating or spending time with anyone, and you will die of a stroke at 30. Like it's you have to make healthy life choices at some point. And I think the sooner it's funny, when I was 21, a lot of people told me this, and I thought they sounded stupid. And by 24, I am now telling, I was then telling 21-year-olds like the same thing. And they were calling me crazy. So, it seems to be a never ending torch pass of people who get into poker, that when they first get in, you suddenly have this uh, stream of income that seemingly was impossible, usually for whatever qualifications that you have in life otherwise, especially at that age. Um, and then at some point you realize that the only goal in life is not just to smash that revenue stream as often as you possibly can, because you start to become, it starts to really take its toll on you.
Yeah, one of the I guess phenomenon of public perception plus like what's actually going on. And I remember just back in when I was more competitive, there was a lot of ego with like win rates. Like you on poker table ratings or whatever on Hold'em Manager, you could see everybody's win rates, and that was like an ego thing. But in the real world, it's like so meaningless. It's like, yeah, it's just like it's weird that, and how do you even, and then when you see like, public poker figures, more TV players than grinders talk about poker, talk about win rates, and the public's like, adoring them, and then the grinders like, like you don't even play. And yeah, it's just weird. Like the people you see day in and day out, like whether it's live or online, and they're there and they're raking chips, they're the winners, and a lot of them you just like the public doesn't even know about. They're like the actual crushers.
Very true. Although these days, skill is less important than networking, so it's sort of become a slightly different game, at least at any level other than extremely, extremely the top. Like the guys that hold public lobbies, and the amount of work that takes is extraordinary. And
Hats
big
off.
tip of the cap to those guys.
Yeah.
Outside of, if you can reach that level, it's become all these things. Your win rate is more determined these days by who you play with than anything else.
We've talked about this, and you've been, again, a very heavy help in the second. Well, it was the worst live downswing hand wise in my life, and you have a lot of comments on it, and I think your advice is just like so great. Handling downswings. I think a lot of it's like there's this balance of when you go into downswing, you have this like self-doubt. Sometimes it's irrational, but there's also a fine line of, are you even beating the game? And that's kind of hard to, I guess, discern with the psychology aspect.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I remember when you went through yours, and you were losing your mind entirely.
I was so negative and I felt really bad. But like that was the worst I've ever been as a human being poker player. Like how I acted during that downswing. And
Right.
Yeah.
Well, my advice to people always is, first, like, breathe and relax, and like realize that there's a lot more in life going on, and you have whatever to be thankful for, and you're lucky that your biggest problem is that you're losing in a card game, that you play professionally. In the case of downswings for poker professionals, like, what a fucking amazing problem to have as the biggest problem going on in your life. The second thing is always to ask, like, what you said, are you confident you're a winner? Like, have you played this game for a long time? Like, do you have a sample that backs up sort of a confidence barrier? Or is this like, did you just transition from no limit to mixed games and you just went on the biggest downswing of your life? Like, you probably aren't very good at mixed games. Like, either you need to go back to whatever you used to do, or you need to spend more time studying and less time playing, or whatever. But if you do have that sample, it's like, it sucks. You've hit the point where, like, luck isn't on your side, and we all talk about these variance charts and what standard deviations for poker look like, and they can be brutal. Like, if you run in the bottom X%, it's really, really tough. And 1 out of 100 people is currently going through a bottom 1 percentile downswing. Like, it's in bottom 1 percentile of like a 20,000 hand sample is really, really, really brutal, no matter how good you are. There's I don't know if you know who Nick Frame is, TC from UB. He was a well-known heads up no limit player back in like 2010, and around the time Doug was considered the best heads up no limit player. Nick was top 5 at the time. Anyway, he's still around. He's been posting graphs for the last couple of years of him playing on ACR PLO games where he has run like 500K below EV in all-ins, where that's literally just like when you get the money in, it records if the pot were chopped exactly according to how much equity you have. So let's say you get it in for 20K each, so it's a 40K pot. You get it in and you have exactly 50%. So that 40K pot, you're entitled to 20K of that pot, but you're either going to net 40K or 0 from that outcome. And so the all-in EV line would record you have a 20K EV, but then either your result would be minus 20K or plus 20K from that point, because you either win the whole pot, which is plus 20K from that point, or lose the whole pot, which is minus 20K relative to that point. He ran $500,000 under that for, a year and a half, and he ran the numbers, and it was like, yes, this is not like impossible. I'm running in the bottom, 3% of outcomes over the amount of hands that I'm playing. And yes, it hasn't all been against one account that might be super using. Yes, I have friends on the site that are winning pretty big in the exact same games. So like, I trust the software. It's just, holy cow, when you run in the bottom, single digit percentile over a significant sample, it's just super gruesome. And you can be miserable and woe is me about it. Or one thing Nick does is he has a lot of other things he does in life that give him meaning and purpose and goals to hit and things to check in terms of progress. And so even when things are going so unlucky for him in poker, he can point to a lot of things in his life moving in the right direction. And also he trusts his process and his system within the poker. He's looking at the actual way the money's going in, and he's like, all right, like, I'm playing well, I'm getting really unlucky. It's just a really shitty way for a year to go, but I'm still making, good decisions. It's going to work out in the long run. And while it's not working out, I'm still keeping my life together with all these other things that matter to me. And that's really the way that if you want to be someone who is capable of pushing through without putting your life on hold, times like this, that's what you want to strive to be.
Yeah, like, one of the narratives I have would be like, wait, these are first world country problems. Like, you'll be fine, you're getting paid, you have other things going on, like you said. But it just like, and I've seen graphs like of people, just players like much better than me, they're just like boom, and I'm just like, oh my god. Like, and my live downswing, I know because I had a lot of experience online, I've ran worse online, like graph wise, and just like it really was one of the biggest wake up calls in my life for poker, because I already, I'm not the most responsible, but I'm definitely not even close to irresponsible when it comes to poker. So I was like, okay, wake up call, like, do you want to battle for every fraction of EV or live life responsibly? So yeah, that's like, and that's where, when I was complaining, like you, like JJ and some of the other house players on my network, and I realized too, like, the older you get, you just can't be doing these things anymore. When you're in your 20s or even your earlier 30s, like, and you have a network, you kind of like vent to each other. When you get older, like, people got their own damn problems, and it's that part factors into, at least my decision of just like, yeah, gotta reduce this as little as possible, and can't rely on people to be able to, vent to, which is, in my opinion, very important to getting back into like the swing of it. and playing your best, if not higher end game.
Yeah.
Let's see, we're covered. What do you have any thoughts of like people going pro at poker today, whether they should or not?
I would say at this point, you should not leave it's very relative to your circumstances and your disposition. So like there were a lot of guys that got into poker earlier than me. I would say it was more common, who were on a path where they could have been, significant guys at a hedge fund, or um, you know, doctors from top tier medical schools, or lawyers from top tier law schools that were going to end up in law firms. And they decided that like the better monetary decision for them was to play poker. And I do not think that is the case at this point. You are very, very unlikely to be making the right monetary decision if you are on a safe track for a significantly paying job. Um, if you are a talented poker player who is not on that type of track, you've been struggling or failing in high school, but like you have this, it's partially because of this passion of yours. There's definitely, at least assuming we're ever allowed to play live poker again, there's definitely still a path where you might be making the right decision from that point. But I would warn everyone, and I feel this becomes more important every year, that the only reason at this point to pursue poker professionally is if you truly actually enjoy it, and it is the, like, I would have to say it is the number one passion for you in life. Like you just fucking love poker. There are so many people that are stuck in poker at this point that got into it not because it was their number one passion, but because it was easy money for them at the time that they got into it. And they are sort of buried into poker at this point, where they don't really see a way to exit poker and find a job that pays them enough money to continue sustaining whatever level of livelihood they have. And they are miserable because they're stuck in poker doing something that they don't want to be doing. And they feel like they actively hate their job. They're making less than they were making the previous year almost every single year. And, it's funny, people say that they got into poker to avoid the trap of the 9 to 5 and the trap of like hating your job and being miserable. So many of the guys that did this because like this is easy money and free or whatever, have found themselves seemingly exuding the same qualities and energy that you typically associate with the guys from Office Space that are stuck in their cubicles and want nothing more than to get the fuck out of the job that they're in, but don't really know what else to do. That's the only way I would recommend to anyone is don't leave a significantly safe and clear path, and also only do it if it is 100% your number one passion, that you are like, it is what you live, sleep, and breathe. Like that's what it has to be to make this a smart choice in 2020.
Yeah, I totally agreed. Like a lot of stuff back then is just like fire up, lobbies, or just show up and you'll do decently well, and you don't have to be like, the top player, and that would be appealing versus going to a job. And then I've commented on this like, maybe over 5 years ago, it's starting to happen when you just have to like chase down games, or just like you have to like try to get in, and you're a slave to the game now instead of this like 9 to 5 schedule. And then the 9 to 5 schedule doesn't even seem that bad. Like when you like if you get locked out, or you're just like you get a text.
Right. When you're chasing down games, it's actively worse than a 9 to 5, because you basically have to be available to play the games when the game is running and available, which is not often and is completely sporadic and random. At least 9 to 5, like when it was going to be. The reason people liked it so much in the past was because it was available 24/7.
Yep.
Literally, you could build your schedule. And that's slowly, and again, this is why there's like a difference partially between don't leave like a safe path. Like there's always going to be more or less 24/7 decent, like 2-5 no limit that you can make 40 to 50 to 60K a year very easily at your local casino, whatever your skill level is, as long as you're willing to put in some energy. And if that's competitive with what your current life trajectory is anyway, then if you actually do enjoy poker, it's a pretty good spot. Um, but if you want to like make it at higher stakes at this point, like unless you truly love poker, again, it's sort of a worse situation. It's slowly evolving into a tougher situation than many actual jobs are, in order to be
I agree.
proficient and available for it. And even then, you might not, depending on who you are and what your personality is, it still might not be enough to really find enough access.
Yeah, I mean, I touched on a lot of good stuff, and just like I have other interests, and I have this like weird. I've evolved to some kind of weird niche where, like, I guess if you're a mid stakes pro, and that's basically what you focus on, you have to like focus on it. But for me, I could just kind of like wing it and don't have to worry about so much. But I feel like I'm in a more unique situation than most people pursuing it.
Yeah, I mean, you are. You have a lot of other.
Avenues.
You're doing more than just poker, which is a different thing, and is very different from telling someone to maybe
Go for
try
it.
poker on the side versus like drop everything and attempt it as a career.
Do you think it's more viable if like they have a normal job and just like, put in 20 hours a week or something like that?
I mean, again, it's more viable, especially at like if you're just going to play low stakes where a rudimentary understanding of the game is enough to have a win rate. The problem with higher stakes poker at this point is either you network your way into a game, but like if you're networking your way into a game these days, if you're not sort of like connected in some way with the game runner, if it turns out you're a favorite in the game, very quickly the question sort of becomes, well, why are you here? There's you're often only being invited to games where more or less the point is the game runner expects you to lose, and then if you prove that not to be the case over whatever sample satisfies them, they might just remove you anyway. So it starts to get quite capped at the higher limits for you, even as a side project. And if you're playing public larger games as a side project, you can't really do it as a side project because the skill cap is just too damn high that like it actually takes to become a winning no limit player at mid to high stakes these days. It takes a significant amount of time and energy to improve the skills beyond uh, just reading a couple books is not going to do it. Just watching a couple run it once videos is not going to do it. The game is really evolved past the point of casual studying being adequate for being someone that can beat these games.
Yeah, do you I guess you covered a lot of that. Like, what do you think the future of the poker world is then?
I think low stakes is going to remain what it always has been, which is 2-5 to maybe even a 5-10 will probably continue to exist in a public format where the game will be not impossible just because there's enough people with access to that kind of money that just are looking to gamble and like the idea of poker that the tables will always be flush with people who aren't very serious about the game. Everything above that is more or less starting to get efficiently poached, which means um, more or less there's a group of professional poker players who encountered a fork in the road in the last couple of years where they no longer were either a favorite or b enough of a favorite that it felt worth their time to continue pursuing poker as just a player in the future. And the fork in the road more or less was I can quit poker or I can create a private game because I have such a familiarity with the poker world
Yeah.
and make my money through either some combination of playing in this private game that I create, that I create an environment in which I am now the level of favorite that I want to be, or B, um, whatever, I'm just going to make my new profit off of the rake from this game and maybe any other opportunities that come with running that game. Like maybe I can start sports booking my players as well. Um, and so that's started to happen at pretty much every stake above like that 510 limit. And so there will still be poker, but it will be behind closed doors. It'll be in these private environments where you as a player won't really be able to access the games unless there's a reason. And that reason is either, the most common one is they assume you will lose money in the game and they let you in, and they either take your money or they realize that you're a favorite in the game and you are removed from the game. Or B, the other way to get in would be having some connection with the person running the game. They have to have some. If you're a winning player, they have to have some reason for you to be there. And this is a good question to always ask yourself when getting invited to games like this: is why am I being invited? A lesson that I learned at 21, I referenced earlier in this interview. I got cheated out of a lot of money when I was 21, getting invited to an NBA player's house to play, very high stakes poker games when I was someone who clearly looked like they knew what they were doing, was winning in the public games. And like, they were like, oh, just come play this, super high stakes game. It's at this like famous guy's house. Like it'll be great. Like, and the question I needed to ask myself then, that people probably should be asking themselves now, is, why are you inviting me? Because as the person who has control of access to these games, like, usually they're trying to extract as much money from the game as possible. And if they're inviting you and you think you're a favorite and will be extracting money from the game, they must not think that. Otherwise, it wouldn't really make a lot of sense.
Right. One of the, or sorry, when you watch younger players, then I saw you were involved with like, or you did stuff with like Matthew Vaughn and Landon Tice, and you're like super nice about, helping the younger generation. Do you think there are some predominant pitfalls that they have, like in the learning process or their journey?
No. Learning process, like, I mean, guys that are 21 are almost always naive. It takes getting stiffed or cheated in some situations to sort of grow a radar for things that you need to avoid. And you always hope that the way people get stiffed or cheated is in a way that they can financially recover from, because it's something it's almost impossible to find a poker player in the higher stakes community that isn't actively owed money by someone for multiple years. The only question is, how big is your number? Negreanu often references he has an 8-figure number running with active debts, and it's an accomplishment if you're playing relatively high stakes and your number is 5 figures in terms of lifetime stiffs and debts.
Mine's still
so
5.
guys like that are usually susceptible to stuff like that. But I mean, the newer generation is usually just more open to the idea that the game can't be fully felt out. And so a lot of these guys, they're not, solver bots that are just, looking at PioSolver and just trying to implement exactly PioSolver's strategy into their game. But they at least respect it as, some tool that is supposed to be looked at and used in combination with their wits or their brains. And it's this cool little, I'm going to use some of the studying tools available and some of my brain and combine those into doing the best to become the best player I can. And they're super motivated to do that. And they often are quickly becoming incredibly competitive in the higher stakes games. It's just a question of access at this point for them.
I see something with the kids growing up that wasn't really there, I guess, when I was coming up was there's so much information in the game. People just digest all this, and if they have a superior knowledge base to their opponents, they can have this entitlement, and then they don't realize that a lot of the emotional control and stability is probably more important. And maybe like toning down their entitlement, I think.
Yeah, I don't feel like they're often entitled. I don't get that vibe from a lot of them. Although I felt hung out and talked to guys. Like I feel like when guys give off entitlement vibes, that's like not someone that I would spend any time hanging out with or chatting with. So I might have like actively avoided. Those are the guys that are often the ones that I'm describing as extremely toxic at the tables in a live environment are guys that give off massive entitlement vibes and berate people for bad plays or whatever. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Um, that hasn't been my experience, but I agree that's definitely a big issue. The one that you did reference though, which is like discipline issues being super important. A lot of those guys do lack that. You know, I always tell people you won't actually know if you can succeed as a poker professional. This is one of the biggest problems with leaving any sort of career path to try to pursue poker is you will not know if you can succeed as a poker pro until you undergo a significant downswing. Like until that happens to you, you have no idea if you are emotionally equipped to do this. There are just so many incredibly smart people that cannot go on a sustained downswing without losing their mind and either losing it in a way where they just throw away their money playing terribly or start gambling on sports really dumbly or chasing their losses by playing stakes they can't afford, or there's losing their mind by simply saying like, fuck it, I can't do this, I quit. Like those are the two ways that people often react, and I feel like over 50% of humans that try to do this, significantly over 50% of humans that try to do this, fall into one of those two camps and just are not actually equipped to do this as a full-time gig.
So it is live at the bike. So do you have any Garrett stories?
Garrett stories.
I don't know. The audience just loves Garrett stories, so.
Yeah, I don't know that I do. Like, I've played so many interesting pots with him on this show, but we've spent, very little time away from the table. I mean, Garrett's always like okay, so I guess I have a Garrett story. Garrett and Tan. I don't know if you remember Tan.
I don't
know
Tan,
if he plays
yeah.
on the show much anymore.
Not so much, but he and I talk.
So speaking of like discipline issues and whatnot, Garrett very much rolled to do what I'm about to describe and just enjoys zero edge gambling, which is something that I also personally enjoy quite a bit. But it means just like he enjoys just like pure flips, like let's flip a coin for X number of dollars. So when Tan first spun up a roll, Garrett and Tan started doing flips at Commerce that I think started in like the low 5-figure range, but quickly evolved to the point where I think I remember them literally walking around the casino in like a frenzy trying to find the next flop. So like just whatever table at Commerce, there's 40 tables running, whatever one is like still pre-flop and it's about to deal a flop so that they can bet red black on that flop for 20, 30, 40, 50K a flop, and then they would just keep track of their figure and then just move to the next table that they could find with one of these going. So that was one of the crazier things that I've witnessed was Tan and Garrett just like jogging around Commerce and like, oh, like there's a table over here, come quick. Like they haven't dealt the flop yet, and everyone like looks back, they're playing their like 2-5 no limit game and they're like, what the fuck is this? And the flop comes red and Garrett's like, yes, like you owe me 50, and everyone's just like $50, and Garrett doesn't answer them, but it's just like, absolutely absurd type gambling. Another good Garrett story is Garrett when he first got to LA. For Live at the Bike viewers, I don't know how attentive everyone is, but Garrett has definitely tightened pre-flop and calmed down over the years from when he first started playing live at the bike. I think he's gone from VPIPing, 50% a show to something like in the mid 20s a show. And when Garrett was at Commerce before he ever played live at the bike, it was even crazier than it was when he first started playing live at the bike. Like, it's all been a progression. He was I think a big part of the reason is he was a big heads up player online before he started playing live. But he did very well in the Commerce 10-20 games for a long time, and sort of built that style of his that he's had to tone down since. As a result of those 10-20 games, he correctly identified that a lot of the Commerce regs at 10-20 used to like to more or less flex on each other by buying in for amounts of money that were silly, but they weren't actually like there to gamble with it. But of course, it's still no limit. But they were like, oh, like this money will literally never get in. Like, how could this amount of money get in? Like, no one would play like crazy enough bet sizes to put this amount of money in. So these guys, like, they're buying in for 12 to 15K at 10-20 while having, 80K to their name or whatever. So they can't really afford to lose the money. And there used to be pots where, Garrett would open and these regs would 3-bet him, and he would 4-bet and they would 5-bet, and by the 5-bet it would be like to 1,500 or 2K, and it's like they have aces, and Garrett will call. And my favorite hand ever of one of these is the flop comes like Queen 8-3 Rainbow, and the reg C bets, it's like a 4K pot, and the reg C bets like 14 or 1,500, and Garrett moves all in on the flop. And the reg tanks for ages, and folds. And Garrett turns over 10-5 offsuit. So he 4-bet him, called the 5-bet, and then check jams the flop with 10-5 on Queen 8-3 Rainbow, because it's just like a giant, like, I know that you can't lose that money, and I know your hand is aces, and I know you can't call with aces. So here it is, like, here's all of it. I'm trying to think of some more. The first time I ever met Garrett, I was 21. I was in the 10-20 no limit game. Garrett comes in like close to blackout drunk, in my opinion at the time, sits down, requests from the chip runner 100K in chips for 10-20. The biggest stack at the table is, I don't know, it's like 6K. He buys in for 100K. So he gets a stack of pinks. He gets 90K in pinks and like 10K in gold and white and teal or whatever. He like cold 4-bets me the first hand, and then shows a 2, and then challenges me to heads up. And I was like, okay. And at the time, like, I didn't, again, this was like when I was 21, I was in like the process of spinning, and this was like going to be he was like, oh, but we have to play big. And I was like, and again, like, I still have this at 21, I still had this attitude of, let's take shots or whatever. And it's, I can gamble, I can always go back to school if this doesn't work out. I probably had a roll at the time of 150 to 200K. And he wants to play 100, 200 heads up. And I was like, this seems like a great spot. Like, let's do it. And so we buy in, and I buy in for 20K. And Garrett goes from like seemingly like blackout drunk to like in his entire element. He orders like his like super healthy salad and has like a bowl of blueberries bought. And I'll never forget the last hand. I like 3-bet King 5 suited, and he called, and the flop came like some dry King high board, and I c-bet, and he jammed the flop. I don't know, it was like, King 10 5 or King 10 4 two-tone, and I have King 5, and I c-bet the flop, and he jams, and I was just like thinking forever, because like I'm pretty sure it's a theory call, but it's just too much money for me. And Garrett like slowly reclines and is just like popping blueberries into his mouth. And I eventually call, and I ask him if he wants to run it twice, and he says no. And runs out, and then he just turns over King Queen, and I was just like, all right, man, you win. I just can't do this anymore. and I was like sort of stunned. And I remember I actually sat at the table for like another 10 minutes, kind of like processing that I just lost 20K when I had like come into the casino to just like mess around in a 10-20 game. And Garrett's just like calmly eating his like healthy salad and blueberries. And I was just like, fuck this guy. Like, this guy just like totally ruined my night or whatever. And that was the first time I ever met Garrett. So different impressions from him over time, but that was a funny first meeting. And the crazy thing was, as blackout as I thought he was, like 3 or 4 years later, he remembered the hand that he stacked me on, regardless of how nonchalant and not caring he seemed about the whole situation at the time. So he's sharp. He's for sure much sharper than a lot of people, at least prior to Live at the Bike being a thing, gave him credit for.
That was so. I mean, that was like a weird impression because like I played 1020 with him back in the day, and when I saw him, I immediately thought he was like very good. And like I guess some people would say this guy's official, this guy's DJ. I'm like, what? Do we see the same things? I mean, I don't know. But this was like I don't know, way a long time ago. Yeah.
I mean, I just viewed it as like I didn't really understand how live poker worked at the time, and I thought his strategy was terrible, and like he was a trust fund kid giving away his money. And I didn't understand that like bullying people because they're legitimately scared to lose the money in front of them was like a real thing. Whereas like I came from online, and like I personally, when I play, am like, I very rarely feel in any way affected by like anything other than like how can I play the best right now. Like I'm here to fucking play poker and like play my best. I'm not here to like be nervous and scared when someone bets big because this is too much money for me. And even when I do feel like that, I will literally take the time to filter out that thought and get back to just doing it as a game instead of money. Yeah. And I like, when I first started playing with him was so early in playing live poker that I just initially wrote off what he was doing as like stupid and dumb and spewy, and like this guy must just have like a huge trust. So
yeah, I was like, I watched him back then and just had a little intuition, but just like watching him over the years, I'm just like, wow, he does so many things that I never did, that I just like, yeah, I really question myself on like a lot of things.
Well, one of the cool things also that was borne out by all this computer software help that we have for No Limit now is that almost certainly massively over bluffing was the way to go for pretty much all of the history of No Limit, maybe even up till now, but like it's progressively gotten worse, but it was unbelievably good back then, because we found out now that like the thresholds for calling down 200 blinds is, you don't get to fold top pair very much in No Limit Hold'em. And you watch old videos of people folding sets and people folding two pairs and stuff. Like, it's just, when you're doing that, all you're doing is like, you're staking a claim that your opponent doesn't have the proper number of bluffs versus the proper number of value. You're like, I think he has way too much value here. And so I'm going to make these folds that are not sound in theory, but like, they win. I think they're going to win because I don't think my opponent's capable of bluffing or whatever. And what Garrett was doing was, even though people thought they were like hero calling him enough, they weren't even calling close to the amount that like a computer would call against it. And so like it was just printing money back then to just go completely apeshit, which is sort of what he did. I don't want to like credit him as the only person that was doing it, because there were other people around, but like in terms of people that were visible to me at Commerce when I first got there, like he was completely insane by every standard, and I think it was really smart at the time in retrospect.
So I guess we'll cap it off with you have a hand that you have with them that you don't really like, which is the you have Garrett dominated.
Ace King, Ace Queen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a painful one. As one of the biggest pots I've ever lost. Not number one, but definitely like top five or so. So that was the hand where I 3-bet Ace King. I believe I squeezed Ace King. So I think Garrett opens Ace Queen in the cutoff, I think Jackie calls either in the button or the small blind. I think button. I squeeze from the big blind with ace king. Garrett calls with ace queen. Jackie folds. Flop was ace queen 7 with 2 clubs. Ace queen 6 with 2 clubs.
Yeah, it was low. Yeah.
No. It might have been ace queen 9. I think it was ace queen 9. I think Jack 10 was an open ender.
I'm gonna pull it up right now, but yeah, go ahead.
I'm almost positive I remember Jack 10 being an open ender. I could be wrong though. I definitely could be wrong. I'm like not the best with these hands from memory.
No, I've got it pulled up, so don't worry.
Okay, let me know what the flop was before we continue.
I know that it was ace queen 9 against your other buddy Aaron Sachs, because you had a set of 9s.
That was ace 9 6.
Oh, sorry, ace.
It was ace 9 6.
Oh,
Jack.
okay.
That one I remember because I make fun of Aaron so much for it.
Okay, just kidding. I don't know why my computer's crapping out, but this sucks.
That's okay. We can do it. I mean, it's pretty much the same hand no matter what. Anyway, it comes ace queen high, and I chose to check ace king. We're 450 big blinds deep in this hand or something crazy. I believe the big blind is 200. Garrett's open is to 600, and we're like 90k effective or something like that. Maybe even more. We might even be 100k effective. Might be 500 blinds.
I would open now. So Garrett's in the cutoff, ace queen of spades. He raises. Jackie smooths 10-7 of hearts in the small blind.
Small blind. Okay.
Small blind.
I squeeze ace king.
Ace of diamonds, king of spades.
I make it 3,600, right? Something like that.
You make it 3,200.
32.
From the third blind. Flops ace queen 8, 2 clubs, so Jack 10's a double gut shot.
Ace queen 8. Okay, so it's a double gut shot. It's an open ender and a different line. Okay, so anyway, I choose to check. One interesting thing about super deep no limit hold'em is the amount that you're supposed to check in spots like this versus regular depth poker. I remember being really curious about this hand afterwards, obviously, given that it was one of the biggest pots I've ever lost. And I was shocked to find that, you know, the way a computer handles this spot is it does a lot of checking, even with things like sets of aces, sets of queens, and it does a decent amount of checking with, which is not something that people almost ever check, because when you have a set of queens, you're usually trying to get 3 streets from an ace.
Right.
But the reason that it does a lot of checking with these strong hands, it also checks ace queen a lot, is because of exactly how this hand played out. And part of the reason that I called with ace king on the river was that I wasn't giving myself credit for having enough of these trap checks on the flop. And so I was placing myself somewhat higher within my range than apparently I'm supposed to be, according to a dumb computer. So ace queen 8, I check. Garrett pots it. I call. The turn is like a brick. It's like a 6.
3 of diamonds.
3? Okay.
3
Offsuit
diamonds.
3.
Yeah.
I check and Garrett overpots it. He bets like 110% or something like that. And I call. Obviously, I still have ace king. The crazy thing is just like the size of these bets. Like this turn bet is 100 big blinds, I believe. I think he bet 20k on the turn.
He bet 20 on the turn. Yeah.
So like this pot is like massive in terms of big blinds, but really all it is it's just a 3-bet squeeze pot with a pot size bet on the flop and a pot size bet on the turn. It's just the squeeze is so big and the sizes are so big relative to what people are used to seeing. And again, dumb computer, you know, check calls ace king on the flop, check calls ace king on the turn. Queen on the river, offsuit queen on the river. So it reduces the combos that he has of queens and ace queen and all these strong hands. And obviously he has a ton of brick to draws. So front door clubs misses, a bunch of gut shots miss, and the double gutters miss. So there's Jack 10. All combinations of Jack 10 are double gutters, plus Jack 10 of clubs is obviously like a straight flush draw.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of combo draws that missed. There's a lot of just straight gut shots that missed, and a lot of double gutters that missed. Anyway, I check, and Garrett doesn't quite shove, but I think he bets
80,
130% pot. He bets 80K into like
80K.
60,
Yeah.
like 80 to 60, so it's like 130% pot. Um, Silly computer. What do you think computer would do with ace king here? That's a fun question.
Computer says call, I guess. No.
Computer says call about a third of the time. So it's a hand of indifference where it basically is saying,
Oh, right.
uh,
Yeah.
this hand you have to call with sometimes to protect yourself from bluffs, but you don't always have to call because then you're calling too much, basically. And it's saying I've protected myself enough by checking aces, queens, and ace queen on the flop that I have enough full houses here in quads, that I don't have to always call with ace king, which is a really really strong hand on this board. Like I can't stress enough how strong ace king is on ace queen 8 two-tone 3 queen run out where the guy bets 3 streets. Like he should have almost no just dry queen x. Like he shouldn't be betting pot and flop and turn with king queen queen jack queen 10 ever. So like the queen is actively a bad card for him on the river, given that like the only way it improves him is to quad queens, so it reduces queens or ace queen, which reduces the likelihood of. Anyway, so it basically says I check queens and aces and ace queen enough on the flop, and that like ace king is sort of like a whatever hand. In game, I decided I was going to call, um, because I didn't have a club in my hand. Although, again, silly computer actually doesn't really care if it has a club or not. It's sort of indifferent towards its suits of the king. Um, but yeah, crazy, really, really crazy pot just because how fucking big the game is. This is a 80K river bet. We're playing particularly large, and I don't usually play that deep either. Like I bought into this game for 20K. I was on a, I was winning 85K to start this hand for the day. I remember I bluffed Andy a couple times. I think I stacked John Sin with a set of queens against his aces, I believe, something like that, or a set of kings against his aces. I cracked his aces somehow with some large set, and then so I'm just never, very rarely this deep, and yeah, just a wild pot. And then it added to the fact that Garrett in the middle of the tank on the river gets up to blow his nose. Um, and so, a lot of the comments I remember on the YouTube video and on Twitter from guys like Alan Kessler. Alan Kessler was needling me on Twitter because what a fucking idiot I am for not folding when Garrett would get up to blow his nose. My rule of thumb for spots like this, especially against guys like Garrett, is I'm not gonna play mind games with Garrett because Garrett's gonna win if I try to play reads and mind games against him. Like if the only thing that I do is try to make reads and mind games against Garrett, and Garrett does the same against me and is like tries to like metagame me or whatever, like I'm just gonna get ravaged. Garrett's like the best player in the world at that shit. So you know, props to him. He's at a level that I don't even consider trying to account for stuff like that because I
Same.
acknowledge that I will lose that game. And so I just try to make good decisions independent of that from him because fuck if I try to start accounting for that stuff. Like Garrett can start pledging allegiance during hands that I play with him, and I promise I will do nothing differently. Like he wins. Like I'm not gonna like there are definitely people in the poker world that I try to make reads against and do exploits and try to play like mind games, and like Garrett is not that fucking guy. I have zero confidence that ends well for me if that's what I try to do.
Do you know who Brian Micon is?
I do, yeah.
Seals the Club. So it's funny because like I did a podcast with him and he had no idea. Well, he kind of had an idea who I was, but he had no idea I was doing it for Live at the Bike, and he was like, I've seen Live at the Bike. This dude blows his nose in this like massive pot. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's Dan Zack versus Garrett.
Yeah.
I realized.
What did he think about my call?
He didn't comment. He just I was just like at that time flattered that he came out of retirement for a podcast and he didn't even know.
Yeah, it was a surprising name to see. I thought that was really cool that he did that with you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel very blessed and lucky. I'm able to pull some interesting people out of retirement to talk. But
Yeah,
thank you.
he's lived a very interesting decade, the last decade.
Oh yeah, it's still going. Like yeah, just like the talk plus like what I kind of know that's going on that he didn't delve into. I was like, this. I want to watch this guy for as long as we live.
Yeah.
There's one topic that I think you're so much better suited than me to answer. There's always this thing of big bet games, especially no limit hold'em, is like there's a lot of bluffing, and people say there's like no bluffing in fixed structures, which is obviously not true. I don't want to get like I respect like all the games, but like I don't know how to like handle that question because I'm definitely not the emotional type to be like, no, there's definitely so.
I mean, I can answer with just like a very simple math explanation, if that helps.
Sure.
So let's say the only choice in big bet was if you could bet the size of the pot or not bet at all, and you get to the river and you want to bet the pot. So if you're going to bet the pot, you're risking 1 to win 1.
Oh yeah, 1-1. Yeah.
Right. So if it works half the time, that makes bluffs profitable. The other thing is if your opponent's calling, they're risking 1 to win 2.
Yeah.
So they need to win 1/3 of the time. Right? So if they call and they lose 1. They call and they lose 2 now net. They call and they win 2. They break even. So their bluff catchers need to be good 1 out of 3 times, which means you need to have 2 value hands for every bluff that you have in order to make their bluff catchers what's known as indifferent. That means you need to be bluffing quite a bit because you need 1 bluff for every 2 times that you value bet if you're betting pot. Now, let's say the game is limit and there's 9 chips in the pot and you're only able to bet 1. So you're risking 1 to win 9 on your bluff, and they're risking 1 to win 10 on their bluff catch. So they only have to be good 10% of the time to justify a bluff catch, which means that you need a ratio of 9 value hands to 1 bluff in order to bluff. So you're just supposed to bluff less in a ratio to your value hands. The thing that people often miss, and a lot of even professionals still at this point, one of the biggest mistakes they make in limit games is they don't value bet thin enough, which also allows you to have more bluffs. So they often miss value bets, and then the more hands that you value bet, the more bluffs you can have because it ups the ratio of the amount of value bets you have. But almost everyone, and this is why people think there aren't bluffs, criminally under bluffs in limit games. And it's because of this, the idea of a negative reinforcement is so strong in poker that people have forgotten just how math works. So like when you bluff 1 chip into 9 chips, it only has to work 1 out of 10 times to be profitable. And when something's 10%, you could easily have it not work 30 times in a row, and it still might be 11%, right? Like an 11% outcome can easily go 0 for 30. But try telling a human to bluff that 1 chip the 31st time after it's failed 30 times in a row, and people are just like, no, fuck you, I'm going to save this chip. This is just lighting this money on fire. And they sort of lose they lose the big picture. And they just start to, it's like an emotionally difficult thing to do when it works so infrequently. The other thing a lot of people do wrong in limit games is they don't bluff catch enough, because also criminally negative reinforcement happens where most people are either under bluffing, or even if they're bluffing the right amount, 9 times out of 10, when you call that river bet, you lose. They show you a value hand and you're like, fuck this, I'm going to save this chip instead of paying off this bet on the river because I've called 30 times in a row and they've had it 30 times in a row. Why the fuck would I call the 31st time? I don't want to just give them money for free. And again, it just loses like the big picture of like how these games operate. Humans really struggle to deal with odds above and below 90 and 10% type outcomes. with risk reward, and where you push, these small differences really add up over time, but it just feels so dumb in the course of real time that you convince yourself that what you know is right is wrong, and you do the thing that gives you more emotional reward. Like people would rather just be right, and make a good fold a lot of the time, even if the math doesn't work out in the long term for them.
Yeah, there's a guy we know, Matt Smaz. Like he's done some pretty good thin laydowns against me, which I get really upset about because he knows I'm capable of just about anything. So it's really frustrating.
Yes, Maz made some really big folds. I made a final table at the World Series with him that was streamed. It was the 10K limit hold'em, and he made some really big folds there too. Um, and look, Smash is a really great player who's had a lot of success over his career. Um, but those folds are really smart until they're not, and the penalty for how big of a mistake those folds are when they're wrong is so much higher than when the fold is right. Like when you fold and you're right, you save one bet. When you fold and you're wrong, you often lose 5 or 6 bets. Um, but again, Smaz is really good, and
Yeah.
oftentimes when he's folding, it's because he's right. The other person is under bluffing the spot, and that's what makes him such a good player. Is he can identify um, mistakes other people are making and adjust accordingly, which is what ultimately poker is, right? And that's what makes Matt a good poker player.
I want to mention a hand too that I had against Poker Stars where I definitely don't mean disrespect. I think really highly of Big Bob K's game, but like, and I guarantee he'll remember this hand because he was so mad at me. It was like blind versus blind. Like he raised, I had 10-7 off, and it was the flops Ace King Queen. You obviously see that, and I'm just like, I could get him to fold on the river if he doesn't have an ace. So I just floated 2 streets, and then when he checked the river, I just like instantly fired 10 high, and then he just like tanked, knows me, and he just like folds, and I just like have a grin on my face, and he picks up my cards and flips over 10 high. He's like, mother. But just like you could create permutations on like certain boards that with certain runouts, if they try to make an X.
People are going to refuse to call down. Part of limit poker is accepting that you make a lot of calls on the river expecting to lose. And if you start trying to save those bets and people notice and try to take advantage of you, you get annihilated. If you start trying to save bets on the river and people are over bluffing you, it is gross what's actually happening to you in theory.
I don't blame him for the fold. I just like it's one of those things, and I've done stuff on like Jaeger too. It's incredibly good. It's just I can't. You can't be like, oh, I'm gonna always bluff this guy. It's like sometimes you just spot a situation where you're like, okay, I think this permutation, this board, this game condition, and our history has a high chance of working. And
yeah, that's ultimately like poker in the streets, right?
Yeah. Do you have any? Appreciate all your time. Do you have any final words of wisdom for the audience?
I guess everyone stay safe and sane. I really would like to see everyone again at some point. I didn't think I would miss live poker and just being able to see everyone as much as I have, but over time, like definitely introverted, and like definitely when it's always available is something that I don't choose to partake in as often as almost anyone else that's in this industry. But like, man, it's rough just not seeing anyone for almost a year.
I mean, I was surprised too. Like, I'm plenty happy indoors, and then when quarantine happened, I'm like, dude, if this is what quarantine's like, I do not want to go to jail.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think like I've handled it better than a lot of other people that I've interacted with who are more extroverted by nature. But it's definitely still rough on everyone. And so just to everyone out there, just stay sane, and we're everyone's having a rough go at it. So
yeah, let's see what happens after the election. All right, guys. Dan, Zach, ladies and gentlemen, I hope your guys' IQ increased at least 5.3 points. And
nice to talk to you, Wayne.
What's a Dan, Zach? You too. I'll see you
Take
on the
care.
On the Hearthstone streets. All right, later.